And without further ado, Temple Grandin, PhD, is the most accomplished and well-known adult with autism in the world. Now, her fascinating life, with all its challenges and successes, has been brought to the screen with the HBO full-length film Temple Grandin, starring Clare Danes. Dr. Grandin is a speaker who inspires and motivates others through her story. She didn't talk until she was 3.5 years old, communicating her frustration instead by screaming, peeping, and humming. In 1950, she was diagnosed with autism, and her parents were told she should be institutionalized. She recounts groping her way from the far side of darkness in her book Emergence, labeled Autistic, a book that stunned the world because before its publication, most professionals and parents assumed that an autism diagnosis was virtually a death sentence to achievement or productivity in life. Even though she was considered weird in her school years, she eventually found a mentor who recognized her interests and abilities. Dr. Grandin later developed her talents into a successful career as a livestock handler, equipment designer, one of the very few in the world. She has now designed the facilities in which half the cattle are handled in the United States, consulting for firms such as Burger King, McDonald's, Swift, and others. Dr. Temple Grandin currently works as a professor of animal science at Colorado State University and speaks around the world on both autism and cattle handling. Dr. Grandin has been featured on NPR in every major production that you can think of. She's been listed as one of the most important people in the world. Her current book on autism, The Way I See It, a personal look at autism and Asperger's, is her most recent bestseller. She has written many others. It is an amazing, amazing honor to be here in her presence. Let's all welcome Dr. Temple Grandin.
Lots of stuff to talk about tonight. And I think I'm going to get my water ready first. I can't uncap it and hold the mic at the same time. First thing I want to talk about is that autism is a very big continuum. At one end of the continuum, you've got Albert Einstein, the language until age 3. I recently read a biography on Edison, on Thomas Edison. He certainly had a lot of the traits. About Steve Jobs, a weird loner who brought snakes to school and was bullied and teased. You wonder what would happen to them in today's educational system. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you've got a child or an adult with much more severe problems. There's some individuals that are nonverbal, they can learn to type, have kind of a locked-in syndrome. So you've got this huge spectrum going from Silicon Valley computer geniuses to somebody who can't dress themselves. It's called the same thing. Just don't get hung up on the labels. If you've got a young child that's 3 years old and he's not talking, you got to start working with him now. Don't wait for a diagnosis, start working right now. And I had a lot of speech therapy as a little kid. The doctors recommended at first that I get speech therapy. And they did a lot of ABA type of things with me. And teach the kid words. Teach them turn taking. You've got to teach these little kids how to take turns. Really super important. And we've got to limit the amount of electronics. Many of these kids are totally zoning out on video games and they're going nowhere. You do a game with a phone, that phone's got to be physically passed back and forth. They must learn turn taking. You've also got to stretch them. You know, they'll have a tendency to close off the world. You've got to pull them out. I was allowed to have some times for downtime where I could stim, but manners were expected at meals. Teaching manners. Too often I'm seeing parents come up to me, they might have a kid that's a teenager, and they realize that they were on the spectrum, but mom and dad had jobs. And I think part of this gets back to the way social skills were taught in the 50s. If I stirred my mashed potatoes up with my hand, mother would say, use the fork. She would give the instruction. That's a teachable moment. You give the instruction instead of screaming, no, stop it, or something like that. And you've got to sketch it. Also, give them some choices of activity. Okay? You could go in 4-H, or you could go in an art class, or you could go in karate, or you could go in soccer. Give them some choices, but you're going to get out doing some things with choices. Okay. When I was a little kid, I used to think everybody thought in pictures like me. Even as a young adult, I thought everybody thought in pictures. No, it was a shocker for me in my 30s and 40s to start learning that other people didn't think in photorealistic pictures the same way that I think. And there's often common conflicts out in business. Why do the techies hate the suits so much? Yeah, it's sort of the Asperger's against the neurotypicals. The techies versus the suits, that's about basically the same thing. Now the first step is you've got to understand that people think differently. I've been out in Silicon Valley. Yep, you go into the Googleplex, all the programmers are there, they don't even look up. So one geeky kid gets to go to Google or Microsoft, and another one's playing video games in the basement. They're the same kid. You see, I see specific examples. Then the people in the field, sort of visual thinkers versus the academics. And then we have this fight in science, is observation real science? And I go, yes. What do you think epidemiology is? It's bottom-up thinking the way I think. You get a case of food poisoning here, another case over here, another case over here, and you put the pieces together. That's bottom-up thinking. It's called epidemiology. Yes, it is a science. And the artists, they've always hated the accountants. Okay, some of the conflicts are totally stupid, like you work for the government, do I have to wear a tie? No, you don't. Okay. Observation really is part of science. What do you think about the Hubble Space Telescope? How could I do a controlled experiment with the Hubble Space Telescope? Do I point it at the ground? Yeah, well, I guess all the control footage is going to be classified because I think it was a spy satellite before it became a telescope. I was pointed at the ground. Now, when I learned that how I think is different, that gave me a lot of insight. How to get along with other people, how to work in teams. And one of the things we've got to do out at work is work in teams. And when I do a team project, I like to have homework where I have a specific piece of the project. For example, if we're working on a Cargill plant, something like that, I design a cattle handling facility. I do not mess with refrigeration. I have my part of the project. Also, when you have a job where you have to do sequential tasks, give them a pilot's checklist. Okay, here are the steps for taking apart the coffee maker at Starbucks. 1, 2, 3, 4, this is what you do. This is how you clean it. The steps how to put it back together. Do not load working memory. Just don't. Give them the pilot's checklist. Really super important. It's not optional for pilots. We were going on a plane tomorrow, and they'll be using a checklist. They don't let pilots rely on memory on that. It's just too important. All through my career, I have been designing facilities. I designed the front end of all the Cargill beef plants in North America. And people always ask me all the time, what motivated me? When I was in my 20s, and I did those dip fat projects that were shown in the HBO movie, you know what motivated me? I wanted to prove to people I wasn't stupid. Another really difficult thing back in the 70s was being a girl in a man's world. I'll tell you right now, way worse than the autism ever was. Autism was nothing compared to being a girl in a man's world. And they really did put those pool testicles on my car. That actually happened. And it was not pleasant. Absolutely not pleasant. This is one of my most important slides. This is the different kinds of minds. And we need different kinds of people to do different kinds of jobs. And I am a photorealistic visual thinker. It's called an object visualizer. I'm really getting worried that a lot of us kind of minds are getting screened out because of the algebra requirement. So how did I manage to get through college math? Because in '67, the educational fad at the time was finite math. Matrices, probability, and statistics. That absolutely saved me. But you need us object visualizers. Because I've observed a very interesting thing when I was out working in construction. The Cargill, it used to be XL, with IBP, which is now Tyson, and Lombard, now it's JBS Swift. I noticed how the work was broken up, so we're going to have to design a Carnival plane. But how do we go about doing that? The first step is the draftsman lays it out. You know what the secret is? The draftsman lays out the whole entire plane. He lays out all the complicated conveyors. The clever guy in the shop, he's probably on the spectrum, he invents all the really clever mechanical equipment. The engineer with a degree does refrigeration, does boilers, electric power, structural roof trusses, that sort of stuff. But you see, they complement each other's skills. And if we screen out our visual thinkers, we're going to be in trouble. Who's going to fix the electrical substation when the next power failure happens? It's not the degreed engineer. They don't know how to fix substations. They get electrocuted. It's going to be some clever guy that took that 2-year course at the community college. Now this brings up another important thing that I get asked all the time. How did I get interested in the cattle industry? I was exposed to it in high school. I think it's very bad that here in this state, a farming state, you cancel funding for FFA. Now maybe they reinstated it. One of the worst things, because the way kids get interested in careers is exposure. Music, art, theater, we've got a great stage here. I'm glad to see they're putting on plays, because that's something that can become a career. Sewing, cooking. I think a lot of kids aren't getting exposed to enough career stuff. Now another kind of mind's the pattern thinker. This is your engineer, your programmer. But you need us visual thinkers. I was looking at that picture of all the cameras on top of the new Uber self-driving car. There's a lot of mechanical stuff there, and it's not electronic. That's where you're going to need our kind of mind. Now, he still has to fix the engine of that car. There's a huge shortage right now of diesel mechanics and car mechanics. The big meat companies like Cargill and Tyson, they're hiring right now. They need people to fix the plant. And the people that be super good at fixing the plant, they're playing video games in the basement. Instead of fixing farm equipment or inventing new farm equipment. And then you have the guy that's good with the verbal things. He'd be really great at specialized retail. Then you've got other kids that are dyslexic. They may be better as an auditory learner. Learn through their ears. We need to be taking the thing that kids good at, build on. When I was in 3rd and 4th grade, that's when my ability in art became really obvious. It was encouraged. All the time, my ability in art was encouraged. And my mother would say, well, don't just do the same horse head over and over again. Let's draw the whole horse. Let's draw the dog. Take that interest, broaden it out. You got a 3rd grader, and he's bored with baby math. Let him do high school math if he can do it. The skills will tend to be uneven. They need special ed in one that field, like reading, and they can do more difficult math. Let them do geometry. Let them do trigonometry. There's all kinds of free stuff online. At the right price, it's free. And you want to find some of the really interesting stuff, use Google Images to search for things like fractals, geometry, trigonometry. You'll find some great visual websites. Okay, another important slide. Bottom-up thinking, what is that? The verbal thinker makes a grand hypothesis for education. We're going to do this new way of teaching math that's going to fix everything. You know, not necessarily. About 3 weeks ago, I had dinner with a 3rd grade regular ed teacher who got in trouble with the principal for teaching borrowing and subtraction. That is totally ridiculous. Now, I'm not suggesting throwing away the new way, but teach the old way too. Because what's important is that the kid can do math. I talked with some community college kids last week. They cannot find the area of a room to figure out how much carpet to put in it, and they cannot find the area of a circle. I don't know what they do. But I've worked with hydraulics, and you better know what pi r squared is. You will really need that for hydraulic cylinders. Or teach reading. The Dick and Jane books didn't work for me, but what worked for me was phonics. Use a variety of methods. Right now on our campus, they're building a brand new biology building and a new chemistry drawing. One's a steel frame, and the other one is a concrete frame. And when they get done, they're going to be both gorgeous and look pretty much the same. You won't be able to tell what kind of frame they have. But that's sort of like different kinds of reading. Steel frame or concrete frame, it doesn't matter. They both work. Another thing I've learned from having so many years in working with construction, where I'd sell a job, I'd design the job, I'd work on supervising it, and I'd start it up. You got to get the job done. And if that smart kid ends up playing video games in the basement, well, that was a failed project. That's not getting the job done. Now, how does bottom-up thinking work? My concept of what a dog is based on a whole lot of specific pictures of dogs. Okay, let's say I can think of all these different dogs. I can sort them by size. Great Danes, that's really super large. Toy Poodle, that's really small. Chihuahua, that's really small. I could put them on a graph by size. I could sort them by breed type. See, there's a lot of different ways that I could sort them. Toy dogs, working dogs, you do that kind of classification. You see, specific examples are used to create concepts. See, that's why I don't get hung up on labels. Because I'll go to a tech company, and I'll see, people that look like they're definitely on the spectrum, and then I come to an autism meeting, and I have a kid walk up to me, and, it's the same kind of little geeky kid. One's working for NASA, and the other one is not. Now, there's some things you're going to have to be able to learn to do in the workplace, and you can't throw a temper tantrum, and you can't throw things. And one of the things I had to learn, crying's okay. It's okay for geeks to cry. When NASA shut down the space shuttle, they cried. You can watch it on 60 Minutes. And that's why they kept the jobs and they weren't throwing wrenches. And I had some hard social problems on jobs, and I'd go hide in the electrical room or maybe under the stairs. And they didn't want anybody to see me doing it. But that's one of the reasons why I managed to still keep a job. Okay, being a visual thinker, I noticed details. Animals don't think in words. Animals are sensory-based. So some of the very first work I did with cattle, I got down into the chutes to see what cattle were seeing. People thought that was crazy. That the animal would stop at a shed. It'd stop at a coat on a fence. Seeing a car through the fence, seeing some little thing, there's a little red piece of string up there in the corner of the picture. Some little thing that most people don't notice, that animal would see. That was revolutionary stuff in the early 70s. Yeah, it seems real obvious now. But in the 70s, it was not obvious. You've got to give a good non-slip floor. All right, let's see how good you are at observation. How many people noticed that that animal was looking at the sunbeam? Raise your hand. Yeah, that's doing better than mathematicians. They don't tend to see it. And I'm going to show you a slide later on why the engineering crowd needs us visual thinkers. The plants are hiring right now. I can't believe how horrible the drafting is now we're getting from the plants. Because all the people of my generation retired, and the person they need to invent that next piece of really clever equipment is playing video games. And if these guys were getting great jobs in the gaming industry, I wouldn't be criticizing. But that's not what's happening. Most of them have awful outcomes. So what are we going to do with them? Let's say I got a video game addict. They're really addictive. Let's wean them off. And a lot of them are visual thinkers. And they'd be super good at diesel mechanics. Let's wean them off into auto shop. And we need to be introducing things like 4A small engine repair in middle school. I want to find out if this kid going to like engines or hate them. And why am I pushing auto shops so much? There's a jillion jobs out there in mechanics. Every shop is hiring right now. They can't get enough of them. There's one qualification: do not have a temper tantrum, do not throw things at work. And they will tolerate just about everything else. Look at how the zebra and the horse are pointing their ears at each other. When you work with animals, you've got to be observant of details. What is your animal oriented to? Look at where the ears are. One ear's on me, the other ear is on the zebra. And I've worked with a meat plant, so don't worry, I'm not going to show you any gross meat plant pictures. But half the cattle in this country are handled in a center track restrainer I designed. You can look it up on Beef Plant Video Tour with Temple Grandin. You can see the equipment. stills of the HBO movie are actual drawings used on a real job to build a center track restrainer. Those are actual shop drawings that are used on them. I think that's really, really super cool. I love seeing the work stuff. Now, I had to find out early on that the cows know they're going to get slaughtered. So I'd go to the Swift plant in Arizona, that's where I started. Then I'd run over to the feed yards. And I found that the cattle, when they were handling the chute, they ate the same way in both places. They knew they were going to get slaughtered. They'd be much wilder at the plant, and that wasn't the case. And that fence right there, they are very capable of jumping out. But usually they don't. Now, the animal, the visual thing, a man on a horse and a man on a ground are viewed as two totally different things. So it's very important, if you're especially out west, where a lot of horses are used, to get them used to both the man on the horse and the man on the ground. Because if they see their first man on the ground, maybe when they go to a sale barn, they're going to freak out. Because that's novel and new, where the man on the horse is safe and familiar. But think about it, man on the horse, man on the ground. They are two totally different pictures. That's what they are. Two totally different pictures. That's sensory-based thinking. And animals can get fear memories. Like a guy with a black hat abused them, and they're afraid of black hats. Now, you can have a lot of sensory problems in autism. You might have a child that screams when he goes in this room because he sees the fire alarm box and he's afraid it might go off. But just seeing something associated with the dreaded sound, bringing fear. This is one of my facilities. So when you're a weird geek, how did I sell jobs? Portfolio. When I did an interview, I put my drawings out on the table, and I was showing the movie, and that drawing in the movie on the desk was one of my real drawings used for a real job. It was a copy, obviously, but it was one of my real drawings. And I'd show photos of jobs. It's selling the work. I don't have a kid come up to me and says, I'm a graphic designer. I said, show me your work. It needs to be on your phone. You need to always have your portfolio with you, because you never know where you can show it off. Whether it's programming, photography, music, graphic design, all kinds of different stuff. What you have to do is you sell your work instead of your stuff. That's what you do. And you want something that's a 30-second wow. When they look at it and go, wow. Okay, so if I'm a graphic designer and I want to sell a bank that do an advertising layout for them, I don't put weird science fiction art in the portfolio. Definitely do not. So if you got it on your phone, you got one file for the science fiction art and another file for the commercial art. Might be a really good idea. This is just a real simple little layout. Cattle have a tendency to want to go back to where they come from. So that's why that's curved like that. As they come around the bend, that's taking advantage of their natural behavior to go back to where they come from. Now I've got lots of drawings and stuff online, lots of videos, and you come on around the bend, they think they're going back to where they come from. There's a book out in the bookstand by Cy Montgomery. It's called Grandin. And it has a lot of photographs about my life, and it shows a lot of my drawings in it. And it's written so 5th and 6th grade kids can read it. Okay, how does associative thinking work? You see, I think in an associative way. So it's sort of like Google for images. You give me a keyword, shoes. Well, then I see some childhood shoes. Yeah, that's and then I might see the boots that I'm wearing right now. And then, how do I get to a picture of a mud puddle? Because now I'm seeing the boots I'm wearing right now, stepping in a mud puddle. That's how I got from shoes to a picture of a kid splashing in a mud puddle. I'm also saying a situation where I stepped in a lot of you-know-what, and I had to get it off in the hotel room as I was going to the airport the next day. Okay, there is scientific evidence that the different kinds of visual thinking really do exist. The mathematical pattern type and the photorealistic type. But they complement each other. And this evidence is all outlined in the Autistic Brain Book. All right, here's my drawings, showing off my work. I put my drawings out there, and people go, oh, wow, you made me weird that you drew that? Ability gets respect. You sell the work. Now let's talk about work stuff. Okay, when I was a little kid, at 7, mother gave me a little allowance of 50 cents a week. I knew exactly what I could buy with that. I could get 5 comics. But if I wanted that 69-cent airplane, I had to save for 2 weeks. I was doing little shopping on my own, 7, 8 years old. And then also at that same age, mother had me be party hostess at her parties. All the kids in the neighborhood did this, to learn how to shake hands with grown-ups. That was taught. Chores. Middle school, we need to start volunteer jobs, because they've got to learn how to work. Maybe walk dogs for the neighbors. Somebody else's dog. You want them doing a chore outside the home. Maybe working at a farmer's market. Maybe a volunteer job in the library, at church. Got to learn how to do a job. Mother had a really good sense of how to stretch me. And so at 13, she set it up in the neighborhood for me to work with a seamstress who worked out at home. At 15, I was cleaning horse stalls. At 16, I was roofing. Then I was painting signs and selling them. And that morphed into designing corrals. Got to learn the working skills. Now we've got some kids that are now 22 years old and they haven't started working. Well, then we're going to have to start off, square one, teaching them the skills. It's never too late. Now the kids that are in the pipeline, let's start teaching working skills in middle school. The instant they're 16, let's get a job, any job. They have got to learn discipline that they got to be at that Walmart or whatever the job is every day. A certain time. It is a job on a schedule. They've got to do it. It's one of the biggest problems I'm seeing. Now I have a huge visual thinking circuit. Kids that get labels for various reasons often have uneven skills. Good at one thing, bad at something else. We need to be thinking about what is the child eventually going to be doing. Art was the basis of what I do with a cat. There's a whole field, it's called industrial design. There's 2 parts of design. When you look at your iPhone, Steve Jobs was an artist. He didn't know how to program, he was an artist. Yes, who sat in on the calligraphy class at college. And the engineers had to make the inside of the phone work. You see, you need to have both kinds of minds. And there's some more visual thinking circuits. Yep, I got a big one, probably in the top 20%. Now that's the circuit for speak what you see. And that's mine. Got a lot of extra branches. Now at what point do extra branches become an abnormality? There's no black and white dividing line. Okay, verbal language. There's a black and white dividing line between neurotypical and autism and Asperger's. But in biology, that's not the case. When does geeks and nerds become Asperger's? They're the same thing. They are exactly the same thing. This is the problem. Now I paid a price for the extra branches. That probably make me have a language-based search engine for pictures. I have less fibers to speak what you say. So that probably explains the speech delay. But the fibers that are left can be built on and expanded. And I have a lot of speech therapy, a lot of ABA type of stuff. Another little hint, when you're working with language, give the kid time to respond. They are like a slow computer. Give them time to respond. They're not fast. Okay, what's blue is full of water, and you can see where the algebra department got trashed. And one of the problems I have is I have no working memory. That's why if I had to do the Starbucks machine, I'm going to need a pilot's checklist. That's what's called a workaround in engineering. So you give them a pilot's checklist. That's an easy thing to do. And maybe just go from grade school math, my kind of grade school math, like find the area of a circle, find the volume of a tank. That's stuff I had to know how to do for the dip vats, and go straight to geometry. Never got a chance to take geometry. And thank goodness, back in '67, algebra was not the required class for college. It absolutely saved me. And we're screening out too many kids that we need. Next time the power goes off, not the degreed engineer who fixes busted stuff. It's the visual thinker. In '68, Bill Gates and I both had access to this state-of-the-art IBM computer. He could learn how to program it, and I wasn't able to do it. You know, just different kinds of minds. That just wasn't going to work for me. Now, this is a glimpse into the mind of the pattern thinker, not my mind. I'm the photorealistic visual thinker who thinks in pictures. The pattern thinker thinks in patterns. Now, that praying mantis is made out of a single sheet of folded paper. No cutting, no tape. And what you see in the background, that's the folding pattern. I'm going, wow, that's not my mind. And there are some great little origami things. It gets involved in things like origami. You know, a lot of the programs in 4-H have got showmanship classes. That helps build social skills. Okay, where did I get friends? I got friends who shared interests. Friends were in shared interests. I got bullied in school. But where I had friends was horseback riding, electronics, model rocket club, get kids involved in things where there's a shared interest. One really innovative teacher started a Star Wars and a Star Trek club in the school. There was one autistic kid loved that. Now you've got other kids involved with Star Wars and Star Trek. There's some more great paper things. So when I asked an astrophysicist about church steeples, he saw motion of people praying. I see specific individual ones. You see, they are specific. I am a bottom-up thinker. There's different ways to teach the math. Don't get too hung up on it. Because what matters is the outcome. We're going to have really two brand new beautiful buildings on campus, built with different construction methods. And they're both going to be super nice. And that same analogy applies to reading and teaching math. Some more evidence that the different kinds of minds exist. But your most so-called normal people are more of an even mixture of the different kinds of minds. When the kid gets a label, they usually have the uneven skills. Another important slide. Associational thinking versus linear thinking. Linear thinking is much more word-based. Pictures and patterns versus words. And I find people that really think in words, they get really trapped by the labels. See, I'm seeing specific examples of different kinds of kids and adults. Bottom up versus top down. When I talk to policymakers, one of the things I'm very concerned about today is it's all getting too abstract. Okay, let's take animal issues, for example, farm issues. Or someone says to me, some freshman in English will say to me, I want to go into social justice. Well, I don't know, that's so abstract, I don't know. Or I want to work at animal rights or something. But it's all in a total abstract. People need to get down in the field and find out what's actually going on. I'll give you a good example, United Airlines. They've improved a lot since they got Oscar, their new CEO. Their on-time record got a whole lot better. Because Oscar got out of the office and found out that you cannot load and unload planes in 20 minutes and that maybe you need more time in the schedule. And the staff got a whole lot less grumpy. See, that's an example of the bosses getting out in the field and finding out what's actually happening in the field. And de-icing a plane in 15 minutes is impossible. And I feel that I'm qualified to talk about that because I've been on a plane in Denver. In Denver, it's impossible. They line up at the de-icing pad and you gotta wait. And I see this. We talk about it, but I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it both inside the plane and I'm seeing it when I just look out the airport window and I can see it. You see, it comes up as a series of images. It is not abstract. And then I see a little podunk airport where they actually did it in 10 minutes. A little tiny airport, it wasn't a big one. Another thing is a brain can be more social or less social. A brain can either be more cognitive or more thinking, or a brain can be more social, emotional. At what point does something become an abnormality? There's no black and white dividing line between the geeks and the nerds and the so-called neurotypical. For people that think in words tend to overgeneralize. There's a huge problem in policy today. Let's just take animal issues. People get interested in animal issues. They got no hands-on experience with animals, and they say, oh, we're going to study law, philosophy. It's all too abstract. But then on the other hand, you can have the field people that are so deep down in the field, they don't see the bigger picture enough. You need to have both. Let's look at a lot of personality traits, like a music mixing board. You can be more anxious or less anxious, more visual or less visual, more mathematical or less mathematical, more high sensation seeking, like the dopamine junkies that want to jump off of buildings and parachutes and crazy stuff like that. I would never be caught dead doing. Get the dopamine fix. You see, a lot of these traits are continuous. I'm seeing too many kids getting labeled autism, dyslexic, and ADHD, and I'm worried that our educational system is screening them out. Because where would someone like Thomas Edison be today? He was a high school dropout, and his teachers said he was addled. I guess that's an old-fashioned term for ADHD, addled. I don't even really know what that means. It does mean something bad. What would happen to him today? That's the thing that's really, really serious. Let's talk a little bit about anxiety issues. Us visual thinkers, a lot of anxiety. I've been on antidepressant medication since 1980 to stop the panic attacks. I know a lot of visual thinkers. A little bit of Prozac in the morning, it really helps. It helps a whole lot. Gotta take a really small dose. You take too high a dose, you'll get agitation and insomnia. They will mess. Okay, the head of IKEA, ADHD and dyslexic. He's pretty successful. And the head, JetBlue, he had ADHD. Now here's Steve Jobs. This is an iPhone, a good example of the artist and the engineer having to work together. All right, this is why all you engineers and pattern thinkers out there need people like me. Need us visual thinkers to prevent messes. Fukushima nuclear power plant mess. And when I found out why this happened, I'm going, you made a visual thinking mistake so basic, I can't believe you did this. Now, I can't design a nuclear reactor. This is an old-fashioned 60s piece of garbage reactor. The new ones today have much better safety systems. But all you gotta know about this particular reactor is when you need the emergency cooling pump and it fails to work, this is what happens. Burned up nuclear power plant. It is still spewing mess out into the ocean. It is a mess. It's not a very smart idea when you live next to the sea to put that super important emergency cooling pump and its generators in a non-waterproof basement. I'm serious. Watertight doors, simple watertight doors can prevent this. And then the second mistake was social. They never asked for help. You need a big helicopter? Call an army base. They'll bring you one. It's a world emergency. You have anything you want. You stop this. It wouldn't even been that hard to stop. I know heavy millwrights that built the Carnival plant in Colorado that could have stopped this. With some help from the gray hairs at GE, we would have pulled them out of retirement. I want people on the site in the 60s. Yeah, you let this happen. This was a visual thinking mistake. You see, you need to have all the different kinds of minds working on projects. I'm concerned today that too many kids are removed from the world of practical things. See, when you do practical things, you make mistakes. When I was a little kid, I experimented with making little bird kites. And some of the designs did not work. Too often, kids today are too afraid to make a mistake. I had a lot of bird kites that did not work. I also tried to make a perpetual motion bird flying machine. Absolute failure. Total failure. But it was something that I had a lot of fun experimenting with. And then in 4th grade, I got a little sewing machine, a little toy sewing machine, actually sewed. And then I got a real sewing machine in 6th grade. And I can remember making the mistake of rushing and cutting the fabric wrong and wrecking on my projects. Well, that's what you learn in the world of practical things. I think we need to get kids back doing more hands-on things. We got a gigantic shortage right now of people in skilled trades, We need to be getting more people into farming, and I hope Illinois puts some funding back into FFA. How can a farming state cut FFA? I mean, that is stupid. Sorry. I've been taught I'm not supposed to call things stupid, but that is. Now, my salvation in school was the hands-on classes. And then I got kicked out of 9th grade for fighting. And I ended up going to a special boarding school for kids with problems. First 3 years, I learned horse stall management. I cleaned over 2,000 horse stalls. I added them all up. I learned carpentry. I learned roofing. And I wasn't doing any studying. But I think Mr. Payton, the headmaster, realized I was learning how to work. Then in my final year, Mr. Carlock, my science teacher, came on the scene. And he got me interested in science. Now that gave me a reason to study. So when I got into college on probation, well, the college was taking me, I was totally on probation. But at this point, I had decided that I was going to study. They took a chance on me, and it worked. And there were some great teachers at Franklin Pierce that worked with me. Hands-on things, we need to get hands-on things back. And while I was at Hampshire Country School, I made our Skeeto house look really, really pretty. You've got to learn how to do it. Well, other people would like it, not space aliens. And then when I was getting my master's, when I was at the height of my sign painting career, I did science for the Arizona State Fair, the Carnival. This was the world's dumbest exhibit. And money to go to this ridiculous exhibit. It was a wax dummy in a freezer chest full of ice. It was really stupid. And I'm up there painting that sign. I don't even know how I did it off that little ladder, but I painted that sign. And how did I get that job? Because I showed an old sign painter my portfolio. This is getting back to the really important thing of portfolios. Well, how did I get interested in cattle? I was introduced to them on my aunt's ranch. I was introduced to the school that I was at, had a dairy. Students get interested in stuff they get exposed to. One of the things I tell all the college students in animal science is do internships. Try on careers. Try on careers and make sure you're going to like that career. The pig industry here in Illinois is hiring. We had a career fair yesterday at Colorado State. Mash Shops, that's an Illinois company. They had a booth up there, they're hiring. Pipestone, that's another pig company around here, they're hiring. Now we need to be getting young people into agriculture. We really need to be doing it. A lot of young people today wondering about, where's food come from? A lot of young people today don't know where anything comes from. You know what I like to ask young people? What is the cloud? Okay, all your movies and stuff is on the cloud. What is the cloud? Where do the movies live when you download a movie? Some know, they have some idea, and some will go, it lives in the cell phone tower. I go, really? All those movies are in that cell phone tower? In that little box at the base of the cell phone tower? I don't think so. And then I said, get your phone out. I'm going to show you a data center. Aerial view on Google for Images. I'm going to look at the inside of a data center. Vast warehouses full of computers. And they take a lot of power. It is not a cloud. Not a cloud at all. There's a massive infrastructure here. Somebody has to fix that stuff. Somebody has to build that stuff. Well, a lot of students have never even been on a farm. But a lot of students are interested in farming. Fair Oaks Farm, Pig Adventure, right here in Indiana, doing a great job. Big dairy open to the public, big pig farm open to the public. You know, people need to get out and actually see stuff. And one of the things that the survey data has shown is that when a farmer explains why they do stuff, they're much more believable than a PR company is. Now this one's pretty bad right here. I'll blame the UK on this one. 50%. Yeah. Oh, really? You think bacon's made out of wheat? I don't think so. One of my big concerns, especially with all the internet stuff, it's making people get get into silos worse, because you just tend to talk with like-minded people. And there's some of these kids, I want to bust them out of the autism silo, because I make a point of jumping between the silos. We got to work on taking the silos down. They're hard to take down. I found this picture of this hydraulic jaw chipping away at this silo, and I was having a hard time doing it. So I'll do some tech talks, some farming talks. Tomorrow I'm going to be doing cattle handling with Kurt Payton. He's a real wonderful person who teaches cattle handling and stockmanship. Great guy. Talk to business groups. Talk to farm groups. I like going between the silos. And I've done NASA, and I've done Google, I've done Microsoft, and Disney Imagineering, and a whole bunch of other places. It's a real fun spot to ask in these different places. Spot the person on the spectrum. You can find the messy offices. Thank God. So how did I get interested in studying? One of the things that got me interested in studying was interesting scientific stuff like the optical illusion. That is shown very clearly in the movie. You show kids interesting stuff, then the kids get interested in interesting stuff. They don't experience enough stuff and they don't get interested. And that's one of my designs in SketchUp, free software for drawing. There's all kinds of free things online. Coursera, Khan Academy. You just gotta look online. One of the other things I learned about construction is when you didn't have parts, you got to get that job done. There's an urgency. And man, I don't want this kid to end up in the basement playing video games. And the video game industry is going to take the very best programmers and the very best artists. About 20 people for every slot. But over there at the diesel mechanic shop, there's probably 5 jobs for every person you're trying to hire. You've got just the opposite. And there is some of my jobs just first started. What I found is the construction industry is all about finishing projects. That's starting as a project right there. You got to finish these jobs. That's what you got to do. And I can remember 2 weeks before the startup of my first center-track restrainer system at the plant in Nebraska, the equipment company calls me up and says, "We won't make startup. The company that was going to do our galvanizing shut down their equipment for maintenance." I go, "Really?" Well, I was lucky. I picked the horn up, first call, I found another galvanizing tank. And if I didn't find it on the first call, I would have taken Beef Magazine and the Hog Farmer Magazine. I would have called up every company that made galvanized equipment until I found a tank that could do our stuff. And I said, "Yep, get it on a flatbed, you're driving to Illinois now. It's an 8-hour drive, you better get it loaded. You don't have parts, then you gotta do something." Now the other thing is, there were some good people in construction that counseled me socially. Like on that very first project at Swift, I criticized some welding and I said it looked like a pigeon doo-dooed on it. And Harlan Winkleman, the plant engineer, pulled me into his office and explained how that was rude and I had to apologize to Whitey the welder for using that kind of language. You see, that's explaining what to do. See, that's not a teachable moment. Instead of screaming at me, "No, horrible, no, screams and trim," he told me what to do. And the scene in there where the boss said, "You stay clear with deodorant," that happened. The scene where the secretary took me shopping, that happened. And now I thank those bosses. I really thank them. And there are some of my books. And I think right now, they've got some mics. I want to just do a whole lot of questions. And I'm supposed to have a mic here for people to come up to and ask questions. Certainly want to do that.